Okay, so here I am testing English from the translation booth. I see that it works, and I'm going. And now I'm testing English from the second station. I see you. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
give it a try. You don't have to be close to on it, though it's pretty low.
Oh my god. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay.
So we can take you guys up to your office. Our office is shut off.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay.
Good.
That's the
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If I could ask members of council and members of the public to take a seat, we'll begin the meeting in just one moment. On va commencer la réunion dans une minute. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the City Council meeting of the 14th of October 2015. Bienvenue à la réunion du Conseil municipal pour la ville d'Ottawa pour le 14 octobre. For those who are able to, please rise for a moment of reflection. Thank you. If you could remain standing, please. It's with great sadness that Ottawa has lost two important community leaders in recent weeks. Deux grands leaders communautaires nous ont
two great community leaders have left us over the last 2 weeks.
a longtime city councillor for Nepean, the regional government, and the city of Ottawa. Al served the residents of Nepean as an elected official from 1973 until 2000. He contributed to the city in many ways, but today I'd like to make a special note of two. As chair of the Nepean Library Board, he had the foresight to ensure the library, the Ruth E. Dickinson branch, was incorporated into the design of the Walter Baker Centre to create a community hub in Barrhaven. As chair of the region's Transit Commission, he was instrumental in helping to modernize OC Transpo with investments in new articulated buses, new park and rides, improved relationship with staff, and annual increases in ridership. A long-time public servant, Mr. Loney was still committed to the residents of his city long after he left politics. As Executive Director of the Council on Aging of Ottawa, Al played an important part in forming the Older Adult Plan and its implementation. A funeral service will be held in the Garden Chapel at Tubman Funeral Homes on Monday, October 19th at 11 a.m. His family has asked that memorial donations be made to the Council on Aging of Ottawa and the Nepean Museum Reserve Fund. As many of you know, Ottawa recently experienced the great loss of one of our city's biggest boosters, Max Keeping. Max was truly Captain Ottawa, and our city was blessed to have him as a member of our community. As a journalist, he was part of our dinner hour every night as he shared important stories of our world and our city. As a community leader, he worked tirelessly to raise funds for the most vulnerable in our city. Max a travaillé sans arrêt pour prélever des.
As a community leader, he worked tirelessly to raise funds for the most vulnerable in our city.
It's estimated that Max raised over $100 million in funds in the Ottawa area for important causes, although many would argue that this is not his biggest contribution. Whether you met him once or you've known him in a lifetime, Max left a lasting impression on every person's life he touched. More than using his celebrity to support local charities or raising funds for causes like CHIO, Max was always willing to roll up his sleeves and get the job done. Whether it was the simple act of spending time with a terminally ill patient or supporting a family from his own personal resources, there was nothing Max would not give of himself to help those in need. He had an incredibly giving nature, and our city is the stronger for it. Il avait un très grand courage.
He had an incredible giving nature, and our city is all the stronger for it.
Is, on a per capita basis, the most giving city in Canada, both in terms of financial contributions and hours of volunteer time. This was due in no small part to his leadership in creating what he referred to as the culture of caring. Max encouraged all of us to reach higher and dream bigger in everything we do. He leaves with us a community legacy that is ours to not only protect, but build upon. We send our thoughts and prayers to the families and friends of Max and Al, and I'd ask that you remain standing for a moment of silence in honor of Max Keeping and Al Loney. Thank you. If I could ask Councillor Nussbaum to introduce our special guest who will be singing O Canada for us at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I first had a chance to witness the power of Isabella Nicole's vocal cords on the soccer field 3 years ago. As her coach, I could always count on Isabella to issue a loud roar whenever she kicked the ball out of our end zone. The back part of our field, always very ably, I should add. Little did I know then that those powerful vocal cords, which she exhibited on the soccer pitch, could also be deployed to impressive musical effect. So fast forward 3 years, and Isabella is a 13-year-old singing sensation. She has sung at many of the fairs in the Ottawa Valley, as well as for the Children's Wish Foundation, Rogers House, Hartwood House charity events, and at the Governor General's Christmas reception. She's performed at both the 2014 and 2015 Ottawa Blues Fest music festivals, and most recently even sang in Pebble Beach, California, at the prestigious AIM event. You can see and hear more of Isabella. You can visit her Facebook page, Isabella Nicole Music, as well as her YouTube channel, Isabella Nicole. Isabella, thank you for coming, and over to you.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command, car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you very, very much for a very impressive rendition of our national anthem. Alors, merci beaucoup. At this time, it's my honor to call upon Randy Bourne. Randy could come forward. And also Randy's counselor, Tim Tierney. Tim is right here. Come on up, Randy. Now, this is a bit of a surprise for Randy because Randy thought his whole committee was getting this award, but it's actually just you. So come on over here and stand beside Tim. Sorry to surprise you like that.
There's no I in team.
As a longtime philanthropist in the community, Randy Bourne has touched the lives of the youth, seniors, and everyone in between in his community. As an indispensable volunteer with Councillor Tierney's Celebrate Summer Committee, Randy's dedication is always a driving factor to bringing fun and important community events to life each and every year in Beacon Hill, Searville. In fact, Randy was under the impression, as I mentioned, that he was here to receive the award with his fellow committee members who are here. However, Councillor Tierney and members of the Beacon Hill Searville community thought it important to recognize Randy on his own for his leadership skills and his many contributions. As National Mental Health Illness Awareness Week just passed, it's fitting that we can recognize Randy's year-round commitment to the cause as a volunteer with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Through the Alliance, Randy teaches a 12-week course to help families with loved ones suffering from mental illness. Randy is also a strong advocate for seniors in our community. Randy est aussi un allié des aînés à Ottawa.
Randy is also a strong advocate for Ottawa.
stay in their homes, Randy helps organize Meals on Wheels program through the Eastern Ottawa Resource Centre. Meals on Wheels, of course, as we know, is an essential nonprofit in our city which provides nutritious meals, daily check-ins, and companionships for many of our senior citizens in all parts of Ottawa. Mr. Bourne still manages to find time to volunteer with the youth of our city as well. Randy has been a long-time Cubs and Boy Scout leader, T-ball coach, and teaches a regular religion class to elementary students at his local church. Thank you, Randy, for all that you do in our community. Merci pour tous vos efforts dans la communauté.
Thank you for all you do for the community.
City Builder Award for the tremendous work you're doing in the community. Congratulations. Come on up here and we'll present this to you.
I'd just like to say it's quite an honor to get recognized here. There is no I in team. Most of the stuff I do is only because other people have showed me the way to do things. And I really appreciate the recognition, and I'm sure many people will be deserving of this down the road too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Randy, and thank you to family and friends who are here. I'd now like to ask Mr. Stan Stapleton, Union of Solicitor General Employees, National President, Michael Allen, Secretary of the Board and President and CEO of the United Way of Ottawa, and Marco Pagani, President of the Community Foundation of Ottawa, if they could all come forward at this time for a very special presentation. As many of you know, we here at the City of Ottawa have been taking action on the tragedy known as the Syrian refugee crisis. Earlier this month, we held a public forum here in Ottawa City Hall where people who were looking to assist with this cause, and over 1,000 people turned out to show their support and find out how they could help. I'm happy to say that the response was very positive, and I'm proud that our city and our residents are stepping up to the plate to help those who are in need of our assistance.
I'm happy to say that the response was very positive, and I'm proud that our city and our residents are stepping up to help those who need our assistance.
Has an impressive history when it comes to supporting refugees, and we're showing that we are a caring and generous community. Not only our residents, but also a number of localized organizations and community groups are finding ways to help to contribute to this important cause, and I thank our entire community for this incredible response. We have a wonderful example of that community support here today at City Council.
We have a wonderful example of this support here at City Council today.
Today, we receive a significant contribution in our fundraising efforts from the Union of Solicitor General Employees, and we thank them very much for their generosity. And I'd like to ask Mr. Stan Stapleton, National President, to say a few words and announce the contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the Union of Solicitor General Employees, les syndicats des employés du Soliciteur Général, work every day to keep Canadians safe. We work as parole officers, detachment assistants, and a wide variety of other positions within corrections, RCMP, Justice, Human Rights Commission, and 12 other departments that focus on law enforcement, public safety, and human rights. We have over 4,000 members in the Ottawa area alone. USGE members are proud of what we do every day to ensure the safety and security of Canadians. So when we heard about the crisis in Syria and the tremendous insecurity and human rights violations that Syrian refugees are facing, we wanted to help. We are pleased to present this check for $15,000 and very much hope it inspires other organizations to act while providing some support to people who are very much in need. Thank you again to Mayor Watson for his leadership on behalf of Syrian refugees, and thank you to the United Way for all the good work they do. And also thank you to all those in Ottawa and throughout Canada who want to help with this good cause. Merci.
Do you want to come in here and push down a little bit?
It's a big enough chair.
That's a big chair. Thank you very much. This spurs on all your other colleagues and other.
We have another 15,000 share.
That's great.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Stapleton, thank you. Michael Allen is my name. I'm with the United Way, and together with the Community Foundation, we are together supporting United for Refugees, the initiative that we have brought forward to support the Mayor's leadership around this initiative. The union movement has a long and distinguished and impressive history of commitment to community issues, and this is but yet another example, Mr. Stapleton, so thank you. On behalf of the United Way, and I know my colleague Marco will speak on behalf of the Community Foundation, both of our organizations were very, very honored to have been asked by the Mayor to respond to a call that he offered to the community to organize our efforts around responding to this crisis and the opportunity that there was presented in the community to help. We are natural organizations for that, and we're honored to have been asked. But we bring to this task the capacities that we have, the resources that we bring. We're out there in the community now raising money for many, many other aspects of our work for seniors, but this is an area that is very much part of our work, so it's an honor to have been asked, and thank you again, Mr. Mayor, and to members of Council for the leadership that you have brought to this work. Mr. Stapleton, thank you, sir, for your leadership. I know that while you didn't say it, I'm happy to say it for you as a fundraiser, that this is intended as a challenge to other members of the labor movement, so thank you, sir, for that. I want to thank you for the contribution on behalf of your members as well, and I want to thank you for the ongoing support of labor to our community. Marco, begin.
Thank you, Michael. First of all, I have to say congratulations to the Mayor and the City for their leadership in a coordinated effort under the umbrella of United for Refugees. Along with other organizations across the city, we feel truly privileged to be part of this coordinated effort. And from what I can understand, it's probably the first time everybody in the city has actually operated in a coordinated and synchronized way across fundraisers, the municipality, settlement agencies, and others. So congratulations again to the Mayor for that leadership. Right now we're facing the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. And it's at times of these crises, both here and abroad, where Ottawa steps up, and this is just the most recent example. At the Community Foundation of Ottawa, we're committed to working closely with our donors and other community partners to create positive, systemic, sustainable change to our city so that we can fulfill our ultimate potential. It is really an honor, again, to be participating in helping the refugees that are suffering this plight. Ottawa has a rich history. And as we know, many of these people that end up in Ottawa are not only community builders, but some of them are nation builders as well. So on behalf of the Community Foundation, congratulations, Michael. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, and a big thank you to Mr. Stapleton and the Union of Solicitor General Employees and its members for your generous support. Well done.
Thanks, Marco. Thanks, Steve.
Roll call, please. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Conseiller Minette.
Present.
Councillor Middick.
Present.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Present.
Councillor El-Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Caudry.
Present.
Councillor Taylor.
Here.
Councillor Shirelli.
Here.
Councillor Egli.
Here.
Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Conseiller Fleury.
Présent.
Councillor Nussbaum.
Here.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Chernyshenko.
Présent.
Conseiller Cloutier.
Présent.
Conseiller Blais.
Ici.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Kakish.
Present.
Councillor Hughley.
Here.
Mayor Watson.
Here.
Le Kram est 10, Monsieur le Maire.
Merci. Adoption de procès verbaux, confirmation of minutes, 23rd of September 2015, carried. Declaration of interest, including those originally rising from prior meetings. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêts. Councillor Minnick, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on the veterans plate issue, I have to declare an interest. I, Councillor Minnick, declare a potentially deemed direct pecuniary interest in Council Agenda 19, Item 21, Transportation Committee Report 8, free parking for veterans on Remembrance Day. It turns out my wife has a veterans plate, so I have to step back from this motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Other declaration of interests? Communications, petitions as received. Regrets? No regrets. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation de rapport. Conseiller Ilael Shantiri et conseiller Egli, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Egli, that the report from the Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation entitled Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation OCLDC 2014 Annual Report, Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 8, Audit Committee Report 5, Environment Committee Report 5, Finance Economic Development Committee Report 8, Planning Committee Report 14A, and Transportation Committee Report 8 be received and considered, and that the rule procedures be suspended to receive and consider Planning Committee Report 15 and 15A in camera, subsection 29.3, because of the urgency of this item contained in the report, specific reasons set out below. Waiver of the rules has been requested for Planning Committee Report 15, item number 15 of the agenda, as the outcome of the appeal in respect of this matter to be considered by the Ontario Municipal Board on October 15, 2015. Waiver of the rule has been requested for Planning Committee Report 15, item 16, for the agenda in order to the project to proceed in a timely manner where weather conditions are permissible. Waiver of the rules has been requested for Planning Committee Report 15A, items number 17 of the agenda. Should the settlement not agree upon witness statement will need to be provided by the city immediately.
On the motion as presented, carried. Adopté. Merci. Reports. President and CEO, Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation. We'll deal with this first, as it's an outside agency. Councillor Wilkinson has a brief presentation on the good work they've been doing and hope to do in the future. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And on behalf of the Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation and its Board of Directors, it's my pleasure to share with you the annual report for 2014. I also like to make thanks to Jan Harder, who was the previous chair of this committee, for all the work that she did during the last term of council, and which we actually are reporting on now. Since this report represents the final year from the previous term of council, we've chosen to focus on the achievements of the OCLDC since its inception in 2009, and also the results in the last 3.5 years. As chair, I'm very proud of our accomplishments to date and pleased to present the financials and OCLDC report and audited financial statements to council today. And I'm joined here by Mr. McNair, who is a staff representative or board member of our staff, actually, of Ottawa Community Lands, as well as his jobs with the city. Our mandate is to promote and undertake community improvements in the City of Ottawa to improve, beautify, and maintain municipally owned land, buildings, and structures for the benefit of the community. We achieve this by planning, subdividing, developing sites, constructing, operating, and maintaining acquiring holdings, selling, leasing, and disposing, undertaking or conducting studies, research, and design work, conducting public marketing, and advertising other complementary activities. So the goal of City Council when we formed this organization in 2009 was to develop a corporation that was to achieve those objectives. So our mandate is to obtain optimal value pertaining to both financial and non-financial community value. And that, of course, helps us with the bottom line of our budget. This is based on 4 pillars that emphasize the concern for financial, social, environmental, and cultural sustainability. So our goals are to initiate a single point of accountability, to balance municipal objectives and guiding principles, meaning enter into subdivision agreements, engage in community consultation. We segregate the duties between the owner and the approval body. We address business issues related to development. We maintain a focused delivery to make sure we can market these properties quickly but in a very positive way for the community. And we build on community objectives. So the successes we've had are manyfold, but it is that we have a commitment to public consultation prior to and during the planning process. The importance of enhancing the quality of life in communities is another of our major points of operation. And these have to be responsive to current democratic trends and what the needs are of communities. It's important to provide enhanced recreational and open space facilities, and the report indicates that we've done that. Respect for community values, environmental stewardship, and the ability to obtain both good financial and community value in its projects simultaneously. So what the results of this have been in community improvements. We've supported the development of institutional and community use in some locations. We facilitated the development of adding 1,800 new residential units, catering to varied demographics. We've provided lands for the development of affordable housing units, and we protected 17 hectares of natural environment area and parkland. The revenue results have been very positive, much higher than we originally had anticipated. We generated $53 million gross sales revenue for the term of council from 2010 to 2014. We contributed $32 million of the net dividends to the City of Ottawa, that's after our expenses and costs. And we promoted developments that will generate an estimate annual property tax revenue of $5.5 million. The success also achieved goals of financial, social, environmental, and cultural matters that are important to the city. We exceeded our annual requirement target of $22 million, which is based on producing $5.5 million per year for each of the last 4 years. So we exceeded that by more than $10 million. So that, Mr. Chair, is the results of setting up the organization just 4 or 5 years ago, and it has actually made a difference already to the revenues of the city, and we're going to be continuing in the next year to add to that. We have a 4-year plan to provide revenues for each term of this council. If you have any questions, we'll be very happy to do that. The report's been circulated to council members, which includes our financial statements. If they have any questions on that, Mr. McNair will be very glad to respond to those.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson and Mr. McNair. Are there any questions for the OCLD Corporation? Thank you very much. I know we're pushing you for aggressive targets for the next couple of years, and we know that you'll do your best to live up to those. Appreciate it very much. So on the report recommendation, first item received, the financial statements received, and appointment of the auditor, Ernst & Young, carried. Thank you very much. Committee reports, Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 8, rapport numéro 8 du Comité de l'Agriculture et des Affaires Rurales, Fluellen Municipal Drain, amendment to the engineer's report, carried. Protocol for wildlife protection during construction, updated. Question? Come back to that. Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee and Planning Committee recommendation, Number 4, feed-in tariff program for ground mount solar fit projects. We do have an amendment because I believe another 2 projects. There's lots of solar interest in Ottawa, and Councillor Eli El-Shantiri has a amendment seconded by Councillor Moffat, if you would like to introduce that now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas additional requests for council support resolution for projects associated with the Feed-in Fit program have been received by the City after Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee consideration of the report entitled Feed-in Turf Program for Ground Mount Solar Fit Project, ERAC Report 8, Item 8, which is listed as Item 4 on Council agenda, whereas the window for the application is expected to close on October 23rd. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council amend Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 8, Item 8, to be added additional Appendix F and G as outlined below in the motion. So, Mr. Mayor, this is just to add those came in the last minute, and here therefore be it resolved that Council of the City of Ottawa support the construction and operation of the project on the land. Therefore be it further resolved that the resolution so purpose as to enable the applicant to receive priority points under the FIT program and might not be used for the purpose of any other form of municipal approval in relation to the application or project or any other purpose. So just to add those, Mr. Mayor, to what's been on the item.
So on the amendment, carried. Just on the main report, if you have not gone out to see that amazing solar farm in Goleta in Councillor El-Shantiri's community, it is very impressive, and it's great to see these applications coming forward. So on the motion, carried. Thank you. Merci. Audit Committee Report number 5, rapport numéro 5 du Comité de vérification, and it's great to welcome back our City Auditor. Welcome back, Mr. Hughes. Thank you very much for being with us and the good work on the follow-ups. These are the follow-ups and detailed audit follow-ups conducted by Councillor Hubley's committee. On the report, carried. Thank you for that. Environment Committee Report number 5, rapport numéro 5 du Comité de l'Environnement, 2014 Drinking Water Quality Management Annual Report.
Comment.
Okay, is it a large item or just one brief comment?
Just one brief comment.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I just want to thank the Chair, my colleague David Chernyshenko, on his leadership on this drinking water issue. He directed staff on writing a letter to the resident, and we send it out on the direction, and I want to thank also the staff that they help us working on this. And the result, I went door to door yesterday. The residents were very happy, and we have a long way ahead of us to work and to ensure we have a safely drinking water, but they were very happy with our proactive approach. So I just want to thank the Chair and the city staff for working with me on that.
Great, and that was the well water issue in Greeley, so we appreciate your leadership on that, Councillor. And this is, I believe, the 4th or 5th year in a row we've had the best ranked water in the province, so congratulations to our staff who have done a great job on the report. Carried. Solid waste bylaw amendment. Councillor Chernyshenko has a technical amendment, seconded by Councillor Cloutier. Councillor Chernyshenko, please.
Whereas Environment Committee Report 5, Item 2, Solid Waste Bylaw Amendments, listed as Item 7 on the Council agenda, was issued with an incorrect version in Document 1, English and French. Therefore, be it resolved that Council approve that Document 1 of the report, as approved by the Environment Committee and as attached to this motion as Appendix A, replace the incorrect version of Document 1 issued with the Environment Committee Report 5.
So on the technical amendment, carried. On the report, carried. Dissent by Councillor Brockington and Councillor Monette. Backflow Prevention Program, item number 8, Programme de Prévention des Refoulements. Carried. Hold this one. It was held, yes, by Councillor Brockington. Item 9, Schoolyard Tree Planting Grant Program update, mise à jour sur le programme de subvention pour la plantation d'arbres dans des cours d'école. Received. FEDCO, Comité, rapport numéro 8 du Comité des finances et de développement économique, Comité consultatif sur les services en français, plan de travail 2015 à 2018. Adopté. Carried. Merci. Item 11, proposed 2016 budget timeline and 2016-2018 budget directions. Carried. Hold. Item 12, 2014 charitable and vacancy rebates annual report. Carried. Planning Committee report number 14, zoning bylaw amendment 2 4th Avenue, 364, 368, 370, and 372.
Mayor, could we just bump that to the back of the consent agenda, because Mr. Damani's checking on something for us that just came in?
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll hold that. Community Design Plan, Master Servicing Study, and Official Plan Amendment for the former Canadian Forces Base Rockcliffe. I believe Councillor Nussbaum wanted to have a brief comment, so we'll come back to that. Planning Committee Report number 15, Rapport numéro 15 du Comité de l'Urbanisme, Manotick Area Specific Development Charges. Carried. Item 16, mural at 373 Laurier Avenue East, mural au 373 Avenue Laurier Est. Carried. Planning Committee Report 15A. Does anyone wish to go in camera on this? I know it was dealt with at... Do you wish to go in camera, Councillor? Because we asked members to go to Planning Committee. Is it an in-camera question? All right, so we'll hold it for now and then have to come back to that. Item 18, winter overnight parking regulations, règlement sur les stationnements de nuit en hiver. Carried. Item 19, proposed street lighting preferred partnership between the City of Ottawa and Energy Ottawa, Inc. Clarification.
Just pour
for council members, a special mention was asked to committee to 3.1. So if residents report some lights not being on, the service 311 will be operational. People can call 311 and the service will be provided just like it is today.
There we go. It's not showing up.
Sorry. If we get that fixed, Deputy Clerk, the name is not showing up on the screen. Is this for substantive debate, or would you like to have a brief question?
I suppose it's a substantive enough question that I need a response from staff, so I'll hold it.
Okay, so we'll hold it. Come back to that. Item number 20, Complete Streets Implementation Framework. Carried. Item number 21, Councillor Middick will remove himself from the table. Free parking for veterans on Remembrance Day, stationnement gratuit pour les anciens combattants, le jour de souvenir, motion. Do we have it? We don't. Councillor,
I have a technical amendment, Mr. Mayor. On
Would you like to read that, please?
Yeah. So we failed to Transportation Committee failed to outline the geographical boundaries for the area. So this technical amendment simply adds that. So it'll read, for all on-street parking pay and display machines in the geographic area bounded by the Rideau Canal in the east, Somerset Street to the south, Bank Street to the west, and the Ottawa River to the north, save and accept tour bus meters.
Okay, so on the technical amendment, carried. Adopté. On the motion as amended, carried. Thank you. Does anyone wish to remove anything from the bulk consent agenda? Councillor Middick would like to remove item G, sewer connection bylaw amendment, frontage charges. So we'll hold that. Thank you. Okay, so back to items. So those members of staff who items have been carried, you're certainly free to leave now. Protocol for wildlife protection during construction, updated. Councillor Leeper, I believe, had a question. Sorry. Point of order by Councillor El Shantiri.
Mr. Mayor, I think we need to carry the consent agenda without the G. Okay, because we didn't carry the rest of it.
On consent agenda, minus item G, carried. Here. Thank you. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the draft wildlife protocol, this item arises from the July 2013 discussion around a wildlife strategy. As part of that discussion, there was thought to create the position of a wildlife resource officer. I think this came up a bit during our planning committee discussion, but I'm still seeking clarity. Is it staff's intention to propose a wildlife resource officer at the City of Ottawa? Would it have any advantages in terms of working across the silos? And it ties into a second question that I have around that position. I'm trying to understand how we're going to determine whether or not the draft wildlife protocol is working, whether people are following it, and wouldn't having a wildlife resource officer at the City of Ottawa who can monitor its successes or failures be a good idea? So do we or do we not have plans to create a wildlife resource officer at the city?
Is it on? Mr. Mayor, at this time, no, we are not proposing to move forward and hire a wildlife protection officer.
Where does the wildlife expertise reside within the city, and how can residents tap into it?
In the Planning and Growth Management Department, we have a land use and natural systems policy group. We have approximately 12 FTEs in that group. So we have in-house planning, environmental, biology expertise, and it's that group that develops the policy and develop the policy for the wildlife strategy. So we believe we have adequate in-house resources to continue to deal with the necessary environmental planning policy work that we have to do.
Will they be in a position to monitor the success or failure of the draft wildlife or the wildlife protocol moving forward?
Mr. Mayor, yes. That staff, along with development review staff, because the protocol will be something that is applied or used through the development review process. So combined with development review staff, that will be looked at.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was at the Planning Committee when this was discussed, and it does have a big impact on my ward because I have a lot of natural environment areas that are moving into development. What I approve of the protocol I think it's extremely well written and has a lot of good information in it, but we're lacking anything about how we're going to implement it. And it was mentioned at the committee that it could be done through plans of subdivision as conditions of subdivision and other ways of doing it. But I would like to give some direction to staff, if I could, Mr. Mayor, that we actually direct staff that when they are looking at new plans of subdivision, they consider if there is wildlife in the area, that they have a condition in the subdivision plan that would mean that they are required to follow the protocol, so that we have somewhat kind of teeth of actually getting it to happen, as opposed to just having it loose that it may or may not be. And I know it is being already done in some of the plans of subdivision, so it's something I know staff are seriously looking at, but I just would like to have them confirm that that is going to be happening.
Mr. Mayor, to clarify, the protocol itself is a guide or a reference for staff involved in planning to carry out or ensure that there's protection during the time of construction. It's not per se a requirement of development, but it is something that our staff will engage applicants in when they come in with proposals that warrant the applicability of this protocol.
I understand that, but it's very loose right now, and I know it is a guideline. I have no problem with that. I'm just saying that the condition should be that the developer will work with staff to follow the wildlife protocol as applicable to their development. If that's in their conditions of subdivision approval, then they have to talk to staff about it. At the moment, they could ignore anything staff says because it's not mandated. Is it not possible to do something of that nature in the conditions of either site plan or of a subdivision application, because those are the two places where this issue is going to rise?
Mr. Mayor, as we presented this matter to Planning Committee and now before Council, we're recommending this be a guideline at this stage. Our staff will, of course, work with applicants when it's applicable, but we're not recommending that it be a requirement that's followed up on every application.
That's not what I'm asking for. I am asking that a guideline can sit on a shelf and nothing happen with it. I'm saying that in putting the plans of subdivision, you simply require that they discuss it with staff and use it where applicable. That means that staff can do exactly what you've just said. I'm just making sure that that discussion actually happens and that staff take a look at it. I don't want the blasting when it's starting this winter to result in hundreds of dead animals. I want something happening, and the ones in my area, and I'm sure other council members that have forested or wildlife areas would like to see that happening as well. And at the presentation, it said the following steps were to follow, and one of those steps was how you're going to be implementing it. And I'm just asking to make sure that you start in some way implementing it as a guideline, which means not everything is required because every subdevelopment is different. But I want to make sure that it's always looked at, and there's nothing that right now that makes staff do that. You say you're going to do it, but staff change all the time. There should be something and you can come back with it if you want to, but I just don't want to have it just sitting on a shelf and nothing happening.
Mr. Mayor, I can assure you that won't be the case. We've even changed the checklist that happens at our pre-application consultation stage, and ensuring that an applicant knows at that very earliest stage before something's even come in that this protocol is now in place is something we'll be doing.
So could you then send us a memo to staff, to council, telling us how you are, because that's just something you're doing that's not in the protocol, how you are using the protocol so that we have some assurance of how it's being used? Because I think that would give some assurance, because I know you're going to do that, but you won't be here forever. And the people change and they either follow or don't follow it. I don't want to have it rigid, and I agree with you on that.
I think Councillor, you've asked a question. I believe Mr. Mitzi is in agreement. So
are you agreeing? I would really appreciate that. I'm sure the other members of the council will. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, on the report, carried. I just point out a member of the Legislative Assembly has joined us, Lisa MacLeod, the MPP for Nepean. Welcome, Ms. MacLeod. Glad to have you here. Our next item that's been held is the backflow prevention program. Councillor Brockington had a question on the Programme de Prévention des Refoulements. That's a new word for me, refoulement.
It's the new word of the day, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, two quick questions to staff regarding reporting back to committee. The motion indicates that committee will receive an update in Q1. Will this be before the city goes public with this initiative and before the various institutions and entities are approached by the city? Or will that happen first and then we get a report, or is the report first?
Mayor, the consultation will take place prior to the coming back to committee and council with the input we get from the affected stakeholders. So the consultation will take place first, and then council and committee will be informed of the learning that's done through that stakeholder approach, and we'll provide further details on the program and our approach.
Okay, and I had mentioned at committee the importance of a comprehensive communications plan, not just for the affected organizations, but city-wide as well, the importance of why we're proceeding with this. When is that going to be developed?
Certainly, we heard your comment and took it, we will develop that into our communications plan on this program so that everyone is well aware of the benefits and the requirements of this program going forward. And our focus, as you can appreciate, will be on those impacted stakeholders very clearly, but we'll also make sure that the general awareness is provided as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. On the report, carried. Dissent by Councillor Moffat. Next item is item 11, proposed 2016 budget timeline and 2016-2018 budget directions. I don't know who held this. Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few questions on the report. I'll start with a quick one I had on transit. I'm just looking at. Sorry, I should have had this all in front of me. But I was looking at the. On page 12, revenues and user fees for transit services, the projected net pressures for transit services. And I note that 2016, the net number that transit services is predicting in terms of new revenue is 6.9, then going to 6.4 and 8.5. And just by my math, it just seems to be a significant increase year over year. It would be 2016. We'd be seeing 3.6% increase, then followed by 3.2% and 4.1%. So I wonder if I could just get an explanation as to what that includes and how that sort of fits into the transit affordability model.
Mr. Mayor, the number of 6.9 million is for all revenues and user fees, as the title indicates, and that includes elements of new revenues that staff are looking at, non-fare box revenues that we're hoping to be able to generate. An example would be in terms of new programs for servicing events in the city. A significant portion of that number, though, does include fare box revenues, as you would anticipate. And staff are currently, and this I think connects to and you're right to put it in the context of the affordability update. Staff are currently working on a very deep dive in terms of fare box revenue policy, including a detailed analysis and assessment of ridership patterns and price elasticity of transit ridership demand. And so when staff come back with the transit budget and table it with the Commission in November, we will table more detailed information and recommendations in this regard for the Commission's and Council's consideration.
Thank you. So my next question then is more a clarification, actually, maybe. Page 6 under taxation targets, it notes that the amount of new taxation revenues generated from new properties as a percentage of the taxation base is declining. So does that mean that our revenue growth is not funding our funding growth? So the 1.3% from our revenue growth, I'm assuming that that's what we're talking about here, that it is declining as a percentage of the taxation base.
So we have basically, historically, we've seen about 2% assessment growth every year, new properties added to the tax roll. But what we've seen in the last couple of years, we had a decline already in 2015, and we had a small decline in 2014. But we've seen, just from the information we're getting from the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, we're only anticipating that we will have a 1.3% increase in taxation revenue generated from new properties being added to the roll.
So that doesn't cover all of the cost of growth, then, that 1.3%?
The costs of growth are not constant. They don't actually go up in parallel with the increase in the assessment because, as you know, when you have an increase in your cost of growth when you bring on a recreation facility, it comes on all in 1 year. So it's a bit step-like with respect to growth. But I think in this budget we are actually able to, if you just hang on a sec here, I think we were forecasting growth at $11 million, and the 1.3% should generate enough to cover that.
Okay. Thank you for that. In terms of the proposed budget strategies now, I guess my biggest concern is the efficiencies and what we're predicting around the efficiencies. And there's significant numbers, 13 million, 15.7, 17.9 million. In our last term of council, thought we did quite well. We invested some $80 million, and that produced $40 million annually. So this is similar. This is, just a little less than half that. So I just wonder, what are the investments that we're going to be making going into next year and the following 2 years? And have we done that return on investment? Do we know what those business cases look like?
Mr. Mayor, the numbers that the councillor is focusing on are the right numbers. They add up to about $47 million over the next remaining 3 years of this term of council. I can tell you that staff have, I believe, good ideas that council would find acceptable to achieve $15 to $17 million of that at the moment. So right now we're looking at a gap or a savings target of about $30 million that needs to be achieved over the remaining 3 years of this term. A lot of that is front-ended, and that comes from fixing some of the base budget issues that are contributors to the deficit that we're incurring this year. But the guideline document recommends a strategy where, through the use of some one-time funds, we're able to, as the Treasurer indicated at FEDCO last week, create runway for the organization so that we're going to need to find about $8 million in 2016, 10 in 17, and 12 in 2018. And when I was asked the question at FEDCO last week, am I confident that the organization has the ability to do that, from a series of corporate and departmental reviews, some of which we provided examples in the report that's in front of you today. I indicated that I would use the word confident, but I would be careful to characterize that it's going to be very difficult work. There's going to need to be a major effort put into this with some significant and difficult decisions to make, and that and when some members of the committee asked why they could be confident that this was an achievable target in terms of considering these guidelines, I think an important part of responding to that is the motion that Councillor Aglai tabled at FEDCO that's in front of you here today too, where I think it is important that as we develop the planned approaches to find those savings, that we share those formally with committee and council, and that we report back on the oversight and the achievement of those as we move through the 3 years.
So when the budget is tabled, are we going to have in front of us to make that our decision on whether we agree that 1.75% is achievable with these efficiencies? Are we going to have that in front of us? Are we going to know how we're expected to achieve those efficiencies? So will we know whether there are going to be any adjustments to programs, any adjustments to service standards, any adjustments to, say, user fees? I guess, where I'm going, obviously, is it would be difficult for me to accept a budget going forward, not knowing where that is, and then a year later finding out, well, yeah, we found them, but we found them through, I don't know, cuts to childcare, cuts to social services, or, cuts to our recreation services. Are we going to know what we're voting for once it's tabled? Like, will we see those investments, and will we see the business case for the return on investment, and will we see what those efficiencies look like? I understand that we don't see it today, and I'm okay with going forward with the budget directions today, but I guess what I'm asking is, will I have that in front of me as a council to be able to determine what my level of support for the budget is going forward?
So, Mr. Mayor, the budget documentation that is tabled in November with you will identify for the 2016 budget where management is recommending to council we allocate those savings targets. So, for instance, the portion that of savings that we know how we are going to achieve them, we will provide council with information on that. And then, as I indicated a few minutes ago, there's probably going to be something in the order of $8 million that will be a target that we are, through the work that the document outlines, we are going to identify and go after and implement in order to achieve those base budget savings in 2016. But we will target those against departments, and you'll see those targets in the tabled budget. What's in, perhaps it's implicit, it should be explicit, more explicit in the document. And of course, this is an issue that I know council would have a lot of concern with. We will not be planning to make adjustments to service levels to achieve those savings without telling council about that, if that's what we're recommending. So when we table the 2016 budget, if there are proposed service levels adjustments, and right now the direction is that we are to look for savings and efficiencies that don't affect frontline service delivery, but if there were to be any that we would recommend for council's consideration, we'd be explicit about that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to come back to the issue of transit fares for a moment. I think our approach in past has been a fairly regular and certain, predictable 2.5% increase in the average fare. And I'm just wondering, when I take a look on page 28 of the report, the only mention made of fares is that in addition, the level of fare revenues from annual increases must be sufficient to move towards council's revenue cost ratio target of 55%. Are staff contemplating an average fare increase above 2.5% this year?
Mr. Mayor, as I indicated in response to Councillor McKenney's question, it is, and as Council knows from a discussion this summer, staff are currently reviewing the affordability analysis that was presented to Council in 2013 around the Transportation Master Plan. There are issues with respect to assessment growth, and you've heard from the Treasurer earlier today that it's lower than it has been in the past. There are issues around development charge permits. There's issues around ridership. So staff are doing a lot of work right now on updating the affordability analysis, and as we've indicated to Council before, we expect to be back in the first quarter of 2016. With that, after we've had hopefully the opportunity to learn more about and have more definition around what we can expect from the federal and provincial governments in terms of funding to transit. So the question of fare increases for 16, 17, and 18 is very much tied up in that analysis, and some of the work that specifically I indicated in response to Councillor McKenney's question. So I guess I'd say it's premature at this moment to speak to what we will recommend as a fare increase to you in November, but those recommendations with the information supporting them will be there in front of you in November.
Okay, so it is possible that the fare increase may be suggested at greater than 2.5%.
It is possible, yes.
Thank you. On page 24 of the report, as some of the strategies to offset remaining pressures, there's a bullet. One of the strategies we may pursue is increasing the user fares and charges in line with the cost of delivering the service as identified in the fiscal framework. By what percentage is the cost of delivering the programs for which we have fees and charges, is that going up? Is that going up by more than, say, the consumer price index of 2%, 1.9%?
The cost varies depending on the service. So in some areas it's probably below the rate of inflation, but in other areas it may be higher. So I can't generalize as to what it's going to be overall, but every program area is looking at the fees that they have and the costs for delivering that service, and in moving the cost or the user fee up accordingly.
Right. So there's the potential then that user fees for programs, if the cost of delivering those programs is going up by greater than a consumer price index number, those user fees will also be climbing by higher than CPI.
That is the principle, and yes, staff would be applying that.
Okay, but we don't know at this point what those increases are. We're going to have to wait until November to see those numbers.
That's correct.
Okay. In general, by how much are the city's expenses, exclusive of growth-related expenses, by how much are those rising per year? How much do we expect that they will have risen from 2015 to 2016?
Exclusive of the growth pressures for everything except for transit and rate, the number I have is approximately $52 million.
As a percentage over 2014?
That would require some mental math, which I would actually ask you to give me a minute to.
Sure, of course. And then perhaps a question for the city solicitor or for Kent as well. This document, if we approve it today, sends staff away to look at putting together a budget according to certain directions, but I think it also indicates what Council's policy is with respect to how we're going to build this budget. I want to understand if there are cuts such as what Councillor McKenney suggested would be unacceptable to snow clearing, to our park services, to increases in our user fees that are unacceptable to residents, and we determine that we have no option but to increase taxes by more than 2%. Do we have the flexibility to do so without a motion to reconsider? By how much are we tying our hands in this document in terms of being flexible as we go to approve the 2016 budget?
Mr. Mayor, as in the past, Council sets these targets, but no, during the budget process, you have absolute flexibilities to do those actions that the Council referred to.
Would it require a notice or a motion of reconsideration?
No, Mr. Mayor, it would not.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. To Councillor Nussbaum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, many of my questions have been answered, so I only have a couple left. Certainly, as a general comment, I think the idea of being ambitious in terms of finding savings that do not affect service is a good idea, and as Mr. Kirkpatrick said, we'll have an opportunity to see what that looks like in relation to the 2016 budget when the draft budget is tabled. As noted already, it's difficult at this stage to know exactly what that means, but I'm hopeful and reassured by the confidence expressed that there will be excellent efforts to try and find those. So I think that's a good thing. With relation to transit, I was heartened to hear that there's going to be some further digging, specifically with relation to the impact of fare increases on transit ridership. Certainly, the work that I've seen suggests that there is indeed a negative price elasticity with relation to fare increases, and I guess the concern is that as we enter into a 2 or 3 year period now where service standards on the transit system will be affected, and given the declining ridership over the last couple of years, the concern that I will have is, does raising fares, is that the right move during a period where we're experiencing a declining ridership and when we're expecting difficult service standards? And instead, should we move more slowly towards the revenue cost ratio target with the objective of moving more expeditiously in 2018 once the LRT is in place? I don't know if that's a question, but I guess I'll wait and see the results of the work when the draft budget is tabled and we get to see the work that OC Transpo has done. But I guess what I'm saying is I have a slight reservation or asterisk, although, again, I'm heartened by the ambition in this document. I think we're going to have to look very closely at that plan, and I'm going to be looking at that with a view to seeing whether a fare increase is the right thing to do at this stage. So on second thought, Mr. Mayor, I don't have any questions because they've all been answered, and thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a few questions, and we'll stick with transit just for my general understanding. How can we give guidance on establishing a transit levy now but not know what the fares will be in the future? Why would you not try and establish both of those components, which both feed into the overall revenues of the organization at the same time, as opposed to dealing with one and then determining one at some future date? Because if the fare increase is totally unpalatable to council, you could then revise or reflect on the transit levy. But I would prefer that we try and have that conversation at the same time. So what is the explanation for transit levy now, fares later?
Mr. Mayor, as you know, the document is entitled, these are budget directions and guidelines with which staff working with the mayor's office are to go away and develop a budget that meets those, attempts to meet those, comes back and tables that with council for its consideration with detail. And as I indicated, I think in response to both Councillor Nussbaum and Kenny's questions, staff are doing a lot of work, policy work related to transit fares and ridership right now, and it's in my view premature for us to target an amount. We will be able to do that in November. Council, as the city solicitor indicated, has total flexibility in order to make decisions about rebalancing or allocations between levy and fare at that time. And I would recommend to Council that you give us that additional several weeks to work on that in order that you can have the best information in front of you for that consideration and potential debate as possible.
Councillor Brockington's mic, please.
I strongly endorse the analysis that you're going to do. I think it's already been commented on, but certainly we have to look at what the impact is of rising fares on ridership, and also embrace or understand that for some people this is their only means of transportation. And we also have to live in reality that it costs money to operate a citywide transit system. But I certainly do believe we need to have that discussion about the transit levy and fares at the same time. My other questions are regarding the water rate, the 6% increase. Could I just have a better understanding of what the breakdown is of that increase that goes directly towards infrastructure upgrades versus normal annual increases to operate the system?
In the last couple of years, and 2016 will be no exception, roughly 80% of that goes towards your renewal of your existing assets, and the rest is dealing with the operating increases within the department.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Councillor Leeper's question just got me hearkening back to the days when we used to talk about a municipal price index. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Kirkpatrick, if you can remind us why we stopped stating the municipal basket of services that we deliver, why we stopped talking about the MPI as opposed to the CPI, and if other municipalities are doing that.
Mayor, if it's okay with Councillor Deans, the Treasurer has a better memory of that than I do.
Okay.
Is that acceptable? Yeah.
I think the word he means is scars. The reason why we don't talk about a municipal price index is because the previous Auditor General did a report on, or an audit of it, and he concluded that it was not sufficiently developed and that we shouldn't use it, and there was a recommendation in that report that Council no longer use the municipal price index, which was adopted by Council, so we have stopped tracking those costs. And getting back to Councillor Leeper's question, the number is actually, it's between 2.7 and 2.8% is what our costs are going up. In 2016, but that's primarily, it's higher in 2016 because of the base budget issues we're dealing with that are coming forward from 2014 and 15 into 16.
Okay, and you, in answering Councillor Leeper's question, you excluded a couple of things that 2.7, 2.8 number didn't include. Can you just remind me what those were?
So I haven't included in there transit, and I haven't included rate, and I haven't included police, library, any of the boards. So that really is the citywide component.
Okay, so if you included all of those, then the increase is probably ballpark 4 or 5%.
No, if I included them, it probably would be very similar. They all are police, with the exception they don't seem to have a problem that they're carrying forward from 2015 into 2016, but transit is. So I would expect it probably to stay around the same in total for once I added in all of the boards, commissions, and even, well, if I added in rate, it would bump it up just slightly, but rate is only 300, 400 million out of 3.1 billion, so.
Okay. And then just back to the question about the MPI, are other municipalities using a municipal price index? Because obviously the cost of the items that are in the basket of goods and services that the city is acquiring and delivering are different than a consumer price index. So who is using that, or what are they using to reflect the actual costs increases in municipal spending?
So once we stop tracking our costs for MPI, we also stop tracking who's using it. So I would actually have to go back and research that. But in talking to my colleagues across this province, I know there are none that I'm aware of who are using an MPI. They all set their tax targets based on what is they consider to be an acceptable, what council considers to be an acceptable level.
Okay, but I mean, I do think it's important that we understand how our costs are rising and at what percentage they're rising. So when we're thinking about cost indexes, that we're at least thinking about the true cost, because we might be painting a very different picture when we talk about the CPI, but actually our costs are rising far above the CPI. So maybe it's something in 2016 going forward that we need to research and look at what other jurisdictions are doing and how they are looking at what their actual costs are year over year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shirelli, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, just looking at the description of budget allocations given across the board, we talk about 1.3% increase in taxes resulting from growth in assessment. Now, over the years, you have impressed upon Council the fact that growth in assessment is not a net growth in revenue. It's a net growth in costs. And I believe one year you said that every new person coming into a new area in Ottawa is a walking deficit. So my question is, we are apportioning out the 1.3% in revenue, but when we tell one of our boards or commissions that here's your extra 1.3% revenue, do we also remind them of the 1.3 something or 1.4 something of extra costs that come with that growth in assessment?
We don't need to remind them about the extra costs that come to growth. They tell us. So every board and commission is aware of the fact that they have pressures on their budgets because of increased population or increased calls, increased demand for service. So they're fully aware of that.
Yeah. They may not realize that they're not special, that it goes pretty much across the board, right? So that's on the operating side, but on the growth side, dealing with DCs, we have again a net increase in costs to the city with growth. How do we account for the capital costs resulting from the growth? How do we demonstrate that? And I guess the previous item on the agenda today would have dealt with some of that. But secondly, the increase in operating costs that growth generates. How do we separate that out to reflect upon it during budget?
You do it two ways. In the operating budget itself, we actually parcel out the part that comes from growth, and you see it as a separate pressure, and there's a discussion about what's causing that. So you take on a new recreation center, you open up a new recreation center, those operating costs, those additional staff, whatever it is, are shown separately so you can see the costs of growth. In the capital budget as well, we segregate growth from renewal and from strategic initiatives, and you can see how it's funded. And in there, staff are required to identify the impact that additional growth project is going to have in the operating budget in future years. So if you have a new road that you're doing, they're supposed to be identifying the year in which the road is opening and what are the impacts in terms of additional operating costs to now provide the snow plowing and the street lighting and everything else that goes with that road. So we try to capture all of that within the budget, but every year staff, when they're looking at what their pressures are looking at what's happening as a result of growth. Now, a biggest piece, or one of the biggest pieces that comes to us from growth is actually not in our budget, and that's all what we call the donated assets, which are the subdivisions that are built, and then the developer basically hands it over to the city, and we assume responsibility for those streets. We don't have a capital budget that actually has that in it. So every year, in addition to what we do as what we provide as capital budgets, there is that additional pressure that comes from all of those assumed or donated assets from the development community.
So basically, despite the fact that everybody says we have to move to a point where growth will pay for growth, each year we get further away from that.
I don't think you are getting further away from it. In terms of your development charges, I think you're getting closer. I think, and Councillor Harder can attest to this, we've been fairly aggressive with respect to including growth projects in there, reducing the benefit to the existing, making certain that as much as possible within the parameters of the existing legislation, development charges are collecting the maximum amount that can be collected. But we have to recognize the fact that there is a portion of every capital project that's growth related that still has to be funded from the city. You have been investing more in your contribution to capital every year. So that is not, that city portion is not the thing that's holding us back right now in terms of growth projects. It really is the receipt of development charges at this point. And it's not because the calculation is wrong, it's because growth has slowed down so much.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Conseiller Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine will be very short. I just want to be clear about Councillor Eglai's motion. So when we read capital budgets, it's very clear on where the money's going and the types of projects. Can we, is the motion's intent that we'd see the same type of clarity around the efficiencies that are found on the operational side? I'm looking for a short answer on this.
Mr. Mayor, yes is the answer.
Thank you.
Conseiller Monette, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, some of the just clarifications here. We're looking at 1.75 rate increase, which will bring us to our 2% goal. That is a direction that we're setting out by improving this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. To reach our goal, we are also looking at efficiencies to deal with any of the deficits. That is our main approach to reach our goal.
That is one of three approaches to achieve your goals. So you also have, you're looking at revenues, and you're also looking at one-time funding, just to help us achieve that target. Not all have to do it in 2016, but be able to put in a program that will achieve that over the remaining 3 years.
Okay. A lot of talk around the table about more than 2.5 OC transpo rates. Our direction right now is to come in at 2.5 for OC transpo. Is that correct?
Your direction right now is 2.5 on the tax levy. The transit fare rates are not yet, the detail on that is not yet in front of you. That'll come in November. But the direction here is that they are to be developed in accordance with the fiscal framework and the affordability model.
Okay. So our goal is not really to increase it, it's to try and to keep it at that level.
tax rate to increase by 2.5%. The fares will be set on when you receive the budget in November.
6% for water and sewers. Can you give us a guideline of how we compare with other cities? I know in the past we've had that guideline put in front of us, and actually we compare very well with all the major cities in Canada, and I think it would be very important, especially for the new councillors, to see that 6%, we are not at the high end, we are actually at the low end when it comes to water and sewer rates.
So, Councillor, our position hasn't really changed. Other municipalities are still doing 9% and 10% increases to their water rates. We will present that information in November with the rate budget so Council can see where we place in this province with respect to our water rates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Merci, Conseil. Councillor Blais, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to ensure that there's absolutely no confusion on the issue of the 2.5 on the transit levy versus whatever the potential increase on the fares might be. And I just want to make it absolutely clear that the direction in the recommendation today only relates to the property tax transit levy, and there is no recommendation whatsoever relating to fares.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Fair enough. And so I just want to reassure Councillor Manette and others that any fare proposal that comes forward will be reflective of growth, our transit affordability plan, and opportunities for new revenue sources and other equity issues that we've been discussing recently relating to how fares are done. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So just a couple of observations. I think it's important to remember, as the Treasurer indicated to us, that there is a general slowdown in the economy, and we're seeing that in housing starts, building permits, and so on. And most organizations, when they forecast that kind of lack of growth, they curb their spending, and that's exactly what we're asking our staff to do. The second point, with respect to an idea that was really set aside by the Auditor General, was the municipal price index. I remember, and I think Ms. McLeod will recall these days, every group that comes forward has their own inflation rate. The hospitals have a hospital index, the colleges, the universities, the pharmacists, the doctors, and it usually suits their purposes because it's usually higher than the consumer price index. Yet all of us as citizens have to live with the concept of the consumer price index, which is the most objective measurement of what inflation is growing at, as opposed to let's pick a sector and claim that it's more expensive to run our operation than anything else. So I would strongly urge members of council not to contemplate trying to concoct a index that allows us to ask our taxpayers for more money, as opposed to trying our best to stick to as close as possible the consumer price index, which, by the way, last recorded month was 1%. So I think it's important that when we look at our spending, we do our best to control our spending and ensure that we bring forward a budget that is both balanced and affordable to all our taxpayers. So on the proposed budget timeline and budget directions, carried. Dissent by Councillor Leeper. Next is the Harder-Chernyshenko 4th Avenue issue. There's a motion by Councillor Harder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is the need for this technical amendment is twofold. The setbacks for the southwest corner of the building would have cut off a small portion of the building so that it couldn't be constructed. And two, and another dimension in the same corner was too long. The building would have been physically constructed on 5th Avenue. So there's no change to what they intend to build. We're just fine-tuning the application with a technical amendment, which is before you and seconded by Councillor Chernyshenko with regard to document 4.
Okay, so on the technical amendment as presented by Councillor Harder, seconded by Councillor Chernyshenko, carried. Councillor Chernyshenko, did you have a question to Mr. DeMonte?
Yes, I did. There was a constituent and neighbor and property holder of this property in question who brought to Planning Committee some concerns about the back lane, both as an access route to be able to do repairs on existing properties, do repair on this new building, and in particular this morning raised a bit of an alarm, if that's not an inappropriate pun to be asking the fire chief, about the fire access. He particularly referred to a conversation he had had with one of your officers, and I'm wondering, I brought that to your attention already. Can you address whether the fire department would have already looked at this and given clearance, and what the process is on that?
Through you, Mayor, the councillor did bring forward this citizens' issue this morning to me, so I had the opportunity to speak to both the fire engineer and the acting fire chief. And through our normal development process, they've looked at this modification, and they had no issues. Again, they reassured me that there was no issue from a firefighting perspective, and for the 3 emergency services, they're really the ones that are the lead for us because of their apparatus. There is no issue with this modification that they have. That said, they spoke to the citizen this morning, and they're more than willing to go back, and they're going to do that next week to reassure him and to look at any other issues that he may have. But they reassured me this morning from their expert opinion that there's no issue.
And if, as we might move closer to detailed plans for construction issues arose, how would that be dealt with?
So normally, Mr. Mayor, that's normally dealt through with the development team. If there's adjustments that are required, they would do those tweaks. But again, they reassured me their preliminary look, highly unlikely that there would be any challenges because they're very comfortable as things are moving forward.
Thank you. And this next question on that lane and access to roofs to do repairs, I don't know if perhaps Mr. Moser or anyone else might be able to answer. Is it standard practice that in reviewing an application such as this, where an existing lane would be shrunk or even eliminated, that city planning growth management staff would look at and comment on the possibility that existing property owners would no longer be able to get work crews in to do repairs, or even, as was contended with this one, once this building is built, they might regret not having that back lane for future repairs on this new building?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this was looked at through the site plan review, and there is an ability to maintain the impacted area at the rear of the property. There's no easements required.
And so if this building is built as proposed and approved by Planning Committee, you do not see access problems in the future for existing buildings or this one to do repairs?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. There is no existing registered easement, and the situation won't change.
If I understand, and there's no existing registered easement, that's not necessarily the same thing as it might not become more difficult, get away from double negatives. It might become more difficult for them to get access, but because there's no registered easement, that's not something that you've felt a need to protect or have a need to protect.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, it's not an uncommon situation in an urban context, and in this case, the department's comfortable and satisfied that maintenance will not be an issue.
And if it's not inappropriate to ask you this question, then how would someone go about getting access? Is it required to get permission of neighbors to do that?
There is a provision through bylaw. I'd be pleased. I could send you the link and the information to that effect.
Yeah, and that would not be any. It would be standard, is guess what I'm getting at, as currently experienced by many other neighboring properties, including one where a new building was built.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's a right to entry provision, and it is a standard issue and a standard procedure.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. On the report, as amended, carried. Community Design Plan, Master Servicing Study, and Official Plan Amendment for the former Canadian Forces Base Rockcliffe. Councillor Nussbaum had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If this item is passed by council, it will be an exciting day for many people who have been eagerly anticipating the final approvals of this very ambitious development within the core of our city, 131 hectares, which will eventually house over 5,000 people, have over 2,000 jobs, have many retail spaces at traditional Main Street. It could really give us a very exciting and visionary opportunity to build new residential areas differently. And I encourage fellow council members to approve this plan. I do want to acknowledge in the audience Don Schultz and Jean Lachance from CLC, who have really been steering what I think is probably unprecedented in terms of a public consultation process. It should be seen really as a best practice for our city. We heard at Planning Committee of over 200 individual meetings having taken place, a public advisory council set up. Really kudos and thank you to CLC for engaging the public in such a comprehensive way. So now the hard work is done, and unfortunately the hard work continues. We're going to have to realize the ambitious vision in the CDP and make sure that we not water down that vision and work hard to realize again what is going to be a visionary and sustainable mixed-use community. The last note is one of the main challenges for us moving forward is going to be transportation. We will need to work hard to achieve the impressive modal share targets and really make sure that transit and active transportation are prioritized to make sure that we're not causing further congestion problems for that part of the city. So, Mr. Mayor, in conclusion, I would like to thank all who have been involved, including city staff, and encourage fellow councillors to vote in favor of this project. Thank you.
Merci. Conseiller Fleury.
Yes, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry to my colleague. Usually we leave the colleague from the area to speak first, but he was faster than me on the button. So I want to thank also all the efforts of the group. It was a pleasure to work with the community over the past few years. It's an adjacent community, and as you know, the transportation sectors around the Montreal Road and all, people are very, very involved. Interested. It's a very important issue for the councillors' community and ours too.
Both Toby and I sit on the Business Improvement Association, the BIA for Quartier Vanier, and I can share that our members are quite excited about this program and what it can offer for the main streets in the area, especially Montreal Road. And through that, we will have some relook at elements such as transit and access to the main street, but it's such an exciting program, and again highlighted the efforts of the community, Catalans Corporation, and the overall consultation. So just a kudos to the group.
Merci. On the report, carried. Adopté. Merci. Planning Committee Report 15A in camera. Councillor Chiarelli has had his issues dealt with. So we now have a motion by Councillor Harder, seconded by Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Arising from in camera.
That Council approve the proposed resolution of the appeals by the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association and the Building and Owners and Managers Association of Ottawa, and partial resolution of the appeals by Kaivan Development Corporation, Minto Communities, Inc., Mattamy Jock River Limited, Richmond Village North Limited, and Richmond Village South Limited, as set forth in Document 1.
The motion?
Carried.
Dissent by who? McKenney and Nussbaum. Okay. The next item, sorry?
I appreciate everybody said that, but this is really a very significant thing that's happened. Could I just say a few words on it?
With the will of council, since we've already voted. Agreed? Agreed. Councillor Harder.
So I just wanted to start out by thanking Councillor Hubley, who was my partner in crime, and Ms. Similik and Mr. Moser, and the industry, GOBA and BOMA, and the collaboration that took place. It's a new spirit. for sure, that we're undertaking. But, this isn't Vegas, and it's not about, we're not in the, it's Ottawa. We're not in the business of placing bets and hoping that the Ontario Municipal Board rules in our favor and we get lucky. This is about getting a settlement that's in the best interest of Ottawa. And just so you know, all of you know that our number one priority in this city is transit. You need to know that this is a settlement that we're all agreed are doubling the contribution and development charges of transit from $6,000 a unit to $12,000 a unit. And so you're giving more to transit. You're taking more away from roads. And I know for some people that would be interesting. But the way that we're going to do that is in the significant work that we're doing in collaboration with our staff, with the industry, Councillor Hubley and myself, on standards, a review of standards which we haven't had since the 1990s and is way overdue. This is not about saving money for the industry, although they will end up saving, we will save as well. It's about providing a service at the level that's regulated, and it's about making sure that the costs that we are associated with our growth and our investments are at the level they need to be, as opposed to the level that they could possibly be at. So we're into that with our eyes wide open. I want to thank you for giving me the time to say this. This is a significant decision that we've made. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your work, Councillor. Merci. The next item that was held was proposed street lighting partnership between the City and Energy Ottawa. I believe Councillor Brockington. Oh, Chernyshenko, I'm sorry, your neighbour there. Councillor Chernyshenko.
Neighbour in all respects. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions. Give Mr. Wiley a moment to sit. In short, I'm very much in favor of this. I'm very much in favor of such rapid return, guaranteed return investments that accomplish both energy savings and financial savings in pretty short order. If we do look at other cities, if we look at the scale of the opportunity here, I'll be as polite as I can in saying the city's a little late getting going on this, and there's plenty of work to be done. Can you help me understand a little what was needed to get Ottawa going, and then whether, now that we get this program moving beyond the pilot phase, whether we can ramp up quite quickly and essentially cover all of the potential lighting standards in the city?
Mr. Mayor, the project took a while to get going. The technology, as the councillor knows, has changed rapidly over the last 5 years, so we were really waiting to capture optimal technology, and we think we're there now. In terms of the implementation, it's largely a 6-year implementation for about 58,000 lights. After that, we'll be looking at our decorative lights and some of the other lights in the city to tackle, which is a smaller component and also gives you a smaller payback in terms of energy savings.
Is it possible that actually by, just crossed my mind here rather than a contrived question for you here, is it possible that through that delay we might have actually hit a sweet spot where the technology works better and is cheaper than if we had moved on it earlier? I know that's sometimes a challenge, being on the leading edge versus the bleeding edge of adopting something almost when it's too new.
Mr. Mayor, I believe so. One of the features we are implementing that isn't being implemented in other municipalities that have gone before us are the smart nodes. So these will give us the capability of not only dimming lights or changing the output of lights, but also give us instantaneous messaging when the light has failed. So much more effective, much more efficient, and better customer service.
Thank you. Certainly, I encourage the rollout of this program, and that we do capture those savings as soon as we can.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Shirelli, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So during the course of the pilot project, what were you looking for or looking to assess besides like the energy savings in LED lights? Because everybody knew that was there.
Mr. Mayor, some of the other things we were looking at were the lighting levels to see if we can use engineering solutions to increase the lighting levels. In some areas, we were looking at how it would impact on community safety, because the lighting quality is much whiter quality and things show up much better. So those are some of the things we're looking at changing. And further to that, we did try some different fixtures in some different areas. So we were looking at optimal fixtures. There's a number of fixtures on the market now.
All right, so how many fixtures were tried during the pilot project? How many different manufacturers' fixtures were tried during the pilot project?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have that information in front of me, but I can certainly get it for the councillor.
Is it more than one?
Mr. Mayor, yes, I believe so.
Okay. And when you talk about the number of fixtures, are you talking about the lights or the posts? Or do you have to replace posts as well?
Mr. Mayor, we did not replace any posts. These are all lights on posts, so fixtures.
Okay. And is there any additional staffing requirement to monitor the signals you're getting from lights that may be dimmed or down?
Through the mayor, no, that'll be done with existing staff.
All right, thanks.
Great, thank you. On the report, carried. Item lifted from the consent agenda by Councillor Middick, sewer connection bylaw amendment, frontage charges, modification au règlement municipal. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Just the reason for lifting the item was just to thank staff and express how pleased I am with the situation. This is amalgamation rising its head again. So staff, Alain, Gauthier, Tim, Mark, and their colleagues worked really hard on this with a problem they brought to me in the spring where residents of the ward were paying fees to connect to the sewer system that residents of the rest of the city weren't. We later found out residents of Old Nepean were paying the same fees, so they came up with a solution that I think is fair, where the fees will now stop being paid by just our residents, and it's the same as the rest of the city. And I would like to just, again, thank them for their efforts, and that's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for your work on that, Councillor. On the motion, carried. Disposition of items approved by committee under delegated authority, received. Motion to adopt reports, motion portant adoption de rapport, Conseiller El Shantiri, and seconded by Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the report from Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation entitled Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation, OCLDC, 2014 Annual Report, Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee Report 8, Audit Committee Report 5, Environment Committee Report 5, Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 8, Planning Committee Report 14A, 15 and 15A, In-Camera and Transportation Committee Report 8 be received and adopted as amended.
The motion carried. Motions of which notice have been previously given. Motion dont avis a été donné entièrement. Councillor Harder, seconded by Councillor Middick, and there's a slight change to the motion. If you'd like to introduce it, Councillor Harder, please.
Yes, I would. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, I'd like to point out in the audience that we have some people that are grinning. Biggest grin is MPP Lisa McLeod and Rowan's mom and dad, Kathleen and Gordon Stringer, and other members. There they are. Of the Barrhaven Scottish Rugby Club. And yesterday there was a little bit of a panic because I got an email late in the day saying, okay, we've decided we want to call it Rowan's Pitch. And of course the notice of motion had called it Rowan Stringer's rugby field, I think it was. So we had to do a little bit of finagling, and that all worked out. But really this is about remembering Rowan Stringer, who was a lovely 17-year-old Barrhaven teenager who went to school in Barrhaven, who grew up in Barrhaven, who played rugby and who loved to play rugby, both at school and with the Barrhaven Scottish. And sadly, she passed away on May 12, 2013, and you may recall that in this very building there was a coroner's inquest into her passing that resulted in 49 recommendations, including the creation of an Ontario Act to govern all youth sport in schools and outside of schools to be known as Rowan's Law. Incredibly important piece of work, and one that Councillor, that's your next job, MPP McLeod, has taken up and championed at Queen's Park, and as recently as yesterday, she sent us another update on where things stand, and it looks like Rowan's Law is going to be debated on the last day of the 2015 session, so ahead of time, which is December the 12th, so we're all hoping for that. I think that, right after Rowan passed away, the Barrhaven Scottish Rugby Football Club, I think it actually was Phil that said to me, we'd like to rename the field in honor of Rowan. We took some time with that, and this is just the way I think a strong community does. It takes a little bit of time to think about what's appropriate. So we believe that this is appropriate, so I'm asking you to support me today as we therefore be it resolved that the Ottawa City Council approve the rugby field at Ken Ross Park, located at 600 Longfields Drive, be named Rowan's Pitch, Terrain de Rugby de Rowan, in honor of Rowan Stringer. Thank you. And Councillor Minnick has something to say, too.
Councillor Minnick, please.
Just a little reiteration of what Councillor Harder said. As Sports Commissioner, I'm very proud to be the seconder of this motion to name the rugby field in Rowan's name. I want to thank you, Lisa MacLeod, for having the leadership to bring this forward to the Ontario Legislature. I'd also like to thank the Barrhaven Scottish for being a strong team and being there for one of their teammates. And, of course, Rowan's parents, Gordon and Kathleen, who turned a loss into a great gain for the community and for the province. Thank you very much for that. And I'm excited that Rowan's Pitch will now be a reality with all your support today. And last thing I want to mention is that the MPP has an actual paper petition that we all need to sign so that she can take it with her to the legislator when this goes to the floor on, what day was it?
December the 12th.
December 12th. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, thank you to both the mover and seconder, and to Ms. MacLeod and Mr. and Mrs. Stringer. Thank you for being with us today, and our sympathies at the loss of your daughter. But as Councillor Minnick pointed out, there's going to be a lasting legacy of Rowan and what she meant to the community at Ken Ross Park. So our congratulations, and thanks to Councillor Harder for spearheading this. On the motion, carried? Carried. Thank you. Other motions requiring the suspension of the rules of procedure. Notice a motion for consideration of subsequent meeting. Councillor McKenney, seconded by myself. Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is a motion in recognition of MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. The MAD Ottawa chapter's 20th anniversary is this year, and this motion would help to establish that the fountain here on city lands over on the Laurier side of the hall would be available to be dedicated to MAD Ottawa.
So this is a notice of motion for consideration at the next meeting. Thank you, Councillor McKenney. The next notice of motion is from Councillor Tierney, seconded by Councillor Moffat.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is notice of motion, but to give a brief overview, as chair of the library board, I have the support of our board, as well as many other libraries across the country. We're getting more and more of a challenge as we want to get into the world of technology. A book that may be typically $14 for a library to purchase could be $80 to $130 for that very same book in electronic format. So we're partnering together with Fair Pricing for libraries across the country, and we'll be looking on behalf of, through you, Mr. Mayor, to send a letter to our Canadian heritage and industry asking for fair pricing from publishers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you for your work on that, Councillor. Are there any other? Well, we're going to deal with that at the next meeting. It's in the motion. So we have any other notices of motion this time? No. Motion to introduce bylaws. Councillor El-Shantiri, seconded by Councillor Monette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the bylaw listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws first and second readings be read, and third readings be read and passed.
Carried. Confirmation bylaw, moved by Councillor El-Shantiri, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceeding of the council meeting of October 14, 2015.
Carried.
Okay.
Any written inquiries, Madam Deputy Clerk? Adjournment. Councillor El-Shantiri, seconded by Councillor Tierney, please.
that the proceeding of the City Council meeting of October 14, 2015 be adjourned.
Carried. Adopté. Merci. Thank you all very much. Meeting adjourned.